Red Thunder.
The following movie is rated PG-13.
This is the story of a man named
Paul George. Paul George is an NBA player who plays in a big city called Los Angeles. His team is called the Los Angeles Clippers, and he's one of their star players. Although Mr. George tended to play quite well during the regular season, this was not always the case come playoff time. The story of PG in the playoffs is one of both many highs and many very low lows. It is a story of both quirky memes and hopeful dreams being crushed. What exactly has unfolded in each of Paul George's playoff series, I hear you internally pondering? Well, please, allow me to oblige and tell you the story of Paul George and the NBA playoffs. Paul George is one of the most boring white person sounding names that has ever existed. However, this man is anything but a boring white person. No, he is in fact quite black and very entertaining to watch play basketball. PG has both one of the smoothest offensive games in the league and the ability to lock you down in D. But this is a player we know Paul George as today. In 2011, he was just a baby, a 20-year-old rookie coming off a very average rookie year. He wasn't close to even receiving a single Rookie of the Year vote. So it's not really fair on PG to harp on too long about his 2011 playoffs, but if I was to summarise his playoff performance that year in 3 words, I think I would choose really fucking shit. I think the nerves of appearing in his first playoffs might have got to him, as the numbers he posted in each of his games don't exactly jump off the page at you. But whatever. Again, this is rookie Paul George, and with the Pacers being the 8th seed facing off against prime MVP D Rose, they certainly weren't expected to actually do anything, so PG gets a pass. And hey, PG did get 4 blocks in his second playoff game ever, which is a playoff career high that he's never matched or surpassed to this day. So that's one positive to take away. In his sophomore season, PG made some strides. He wasn't an all-star yet, but he was getting better, and the Indiana Pacers as a team were also getting better. David West joined the team in free agency, Roy Hibbert somehow made an all-star appearance, Danny Granger led the team in scoring for the 5th straight year, and the Pacers headed into the playoffs as the 3rd seed. Now PG at this point was still only a toddler. He was a 21-year-old sophomore that hadn't taken that all-star jump just yet. So again, it's not fair to harp on too long about his 2012 playoffs. But if I was to summarise his playoff performance that year in, let's say, 11 carefully chosen words, I'd probably say not as completely shit as last year, but still pretty shit. I mean, he had his first good game of the playoffs in game 2 of the first round, but the rest of the series he was trash. Nonetheless, the Pacers would advance pretty comfortably past the Dwightless Orlando Magic in 5 games, and in his second year, PG had already won more playoff series than Tracy McGrady did for his entire career. In the second round, the Pacers would face the Miami Heat, led by LeBron James smack bang in the middle of his prime. So the writing was kind of on the wall for this series before it even started. But hey, the Pacers actually managed to take a 2-1 lead on the Heat after Game 3. This wasn't necessarily due to PG, but more so thanks to the performance of his teammates, and also thanks to Dwayne Wade having one of his worst playoff games ever. Getting 2 W's against the super team Miami Heat was nice, however you need 4 of them to win the series, and the Pacers would end up going home in 6. PG was pretty inefficient and shit all series long, but whatever. Nobody was really expecting much of him anyway, but that was all about to change next season. The 2013 season started off on a sour note for the Pacers, after their leading scorer, Danny Granger, was sidelined for basically the entire season following knee troubles in the preseason. However, one man's loss is another man's gain. After Granger went out, PG was moved from shooting guard to the small forward position, and blossomed in this role, becoming the team's new #1 scoring option. It was this season that PG made that leap to stardom, becoming a first-time All-Star, winning the Most Improved Player award, and being named to the All-NBA 3rd team and All-Defensive 2nd team by the season's end. George was able to more than fill the offensive hole left behind by Granger's injury, and was a significant contributor to keeping Indiana competitive. Plus, with other good defenders on the roster alongside Paul, such as Roy Hibbert abiding by his strict philosophy of verticality, the Pacers finished the season as the league's best defense and would head into the playoffs as the 3rd seed. The first round was against the Atlanta Hawks, who basically weren't shit. In the playoff opener, PG would come out and drop his first and only playoff playoff triple-double. He didn't have an amazing game shooting from the field, but that literally didn't matter because he finessed his way to the free throw line 18 times, where he made 17 of his attempts, that being a playoff career high in free throws made that stands to this day. PG played pretty good all series long, the first time you could say that during his career. He was a bit shit in the closeout game 6, but the Pacers won, so who gives a fuck. Round 2 was against the peak Carmelo Anthony era New York Knicks, who were the betting favourites going into the series. And of course, as the Knicks always do when their fans have expectations of winning a playoff series, they lost. The Pacers would win in 6, and PG once more played good all series long. And just like that, the Pacers were only one playoff series win away from the NBA Finals. However, there was a slight obstacle in their way, and that was 2013 LeBron James and the Miami Heat. This was not only the best version of LeBron that has ever existed, but also the best version of the Big Three Miami Heat. Beating the Miami Heat super team would be no small feat, and basically nobody thought the Pacers could actually do it. But in the Eastern Finals opener, it was a back and forth affair all game long, and a big reason for that was due to PG playing pretty damn good all game long. He did have 6 turnovers for the game, but remained very efficient shooting the ball. The game would come to Indiana down 3 points with under 10 seconds left on the clock. Now, for many years, Paul George has been memed for always missing game winners and supposedly never being clutch in the playoffs. But this notion that he's never been clutch is just simply false, and this game is a testament to that. As with 3 seconds left in the game, PG hits this off-balance deep 3 to send the game to overtime. I mean, come on, what a shot. Then in OT, he continued to be clutch, scoring 8 of his team's 10 overtime points. These 8 points included his clutchest points of the game when he made 3 straight free throws after being fouled by D-Wade with a couple seconds left down 2. So the game came down to this final possession here. The Pacers were up 1 point and would be able to steal game 1 if they could just get one more defensive stop. And of course, as his team's best defender, or at least certainly his team's best wing defender, PG was on LeBron. Now, as great as PG had been this game offensively, he had been responsible for a number of crucial defensive mistakes. A few possessions earlier, he let the Heat tie the game when he fouled Chris Bosh as he went up for a putback and gave them an and-one opportunity. And then after that, he switched with George Hill when he probably didn't need to, and with LeBron being defended by little Georgie, he just blew right past him for a layup that gave the Heat a 2-point lead. But if he could just make sure LeBron wasn't able to do anything with 2 seconds left on the clock, he would more than redeem himself with the Pacers taking home a win. Welcome to a moment in history.
Battier gets it in. Here's James on the drive for the win!
Unfortunately, in an instance of what won't be the last time we see someone score a game-winning shot on PG in the playoffs, Paul George overcommits to chasing LeBron and ends up giving him a wide-open layup. Look man, I'm never going to be a fraction of the basketball player that PG is, but how the fuck do you give LeBron James a wide-open lane to the basket with 2 damn seconds left? Driving to the rim with his ungodly athleticism is literally the strongest aspect of LeBron's game. If you have to hang back a little and give him room for the deep mid-range jumper, then you take that risk, as LeBron taking a jump shot is always going to be preferable to him taking a wide-open fucking layup. But anyway, it was a bit of a shame that all of PG's clutch shots went to waste, but still a good game overall. In game 2 at least, he would pretty much redeem himself. He had another good game, and with Roy Hibbert going for 29 and 10, the Pacers would hold on down the stretch to take the W. But without question, the highlight of the game that pretty much every NBA fan has seen at some point is this one here.
Here comes George, got the step and stuffs one move and counts in the foul. He beat LeBron James.
Whilst defended by LeBron James, the dude that should have been that year's Defensive Player of the Year, George blows right past him, then takes Birdman soul as he throws down one of the sickest playoff dunks ever. This play happened over 8 years ago, and I still see it routinely appear in my Instagram feed. This is absolutely PG's most iconic play, with the exception to some recent ones that don't show him in such a positive light. In both games 3 and 4, PG would play not so great, but the Pacers still tied the series with a dub in game 4 thanks to Lance Stevenson. In game 5, individually PG was great, but the Pacers still copped the L, which set the scene for game 6. Whilst down 2-3 with the series and season on the line, George once more actually played good. While facing elimination in the conference finals, PG drops a very efficient 28, 8 and 5, with 28 points being a new playoff career high. And just like that, in a series most people expected to only go 5 games, thanks to Paul George, the Pacers had forced a game 7 against Miami. This was win or go home. A dub today would take Indiana to the finals for only the second time in their franchise history. If PG could lead his team to a victory today, over the Big Three Miami Heat super team no less, that would almost certainly cement his playoff legacy. Nobody would ever be able to turn him into a meme in the future if he led his team to the finals through such a juggernaut at age 23. And the Pacers had more than proven this series that they could hang with the Heat. If they hadn't blown Game 1, then this series would already be over. Well, unfortunately for Pacer fans, their miraculous playoff run wasn't meant to be. And in Game 7, Indiana would get ass fucked by Miami. And Paul George in particular did not have a very good game. After coming off Game 6 where he had just scored his playoff career high, he came into Game 7 and had one of his worst playoff games ever. He dropped a mean 7 points on 9 shot attempts and fouled out of the game. It would appear that the moment may have got to him, and he somewhat choked. Hard. On the bright side, the Pacers had still blown everyone's expectations throughout their 2013 playoff run, and PG had his first good 3-point shooting playoff series ever, averaging 44% from behind the arc for the Eastern Finals. Previously, his 3-point shooting for playoff series had not been so pretty. The 2014 regular season for the Pacers was a great one. The Pacers started off the year going 17-1. PG and Roy Hibbert were named as All-Stars, Indiana led the league in defense for the second straight year, and ended the season with 56 wins and the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. The Pacers' regular season did end a tad bit rocky, with them going 16-13 post-All-Star break. It would seem that their front office's decision to trade Danny Granger to Philadelphia had rattled the team's chemistry and confidence. Although he wasn't giving a huge amount of production on the court following his injuries, Granger's veteran leadership and chemistry building he was responsible for in the locker room is something his teammates have talked highly about for years. David West even later said that when he found out that Granger was traded in February, he knew this was the death of that Pacers team. But surely not. All that negativity can go elsewhere. Paul George was a legitimate star now. The Pacers were the first seed and this was their year. In the first round they would face the puny 8-seeded Atlanta Hawks, who finished the year 3 years below 500. This series would be a wash, or at least it was expected to be. You see, this was the 2014 NBA playoffs, and in the 2014 NBA playoffs, basically every series in the first round would go 7 games. Even in the West, the first seeded 62-win eventual champion San Antonio Spurs would go a very close 7 games with the decaying Dallas Mavericks. And in the case of Pacers versus Hawks, to everyone's surprise, this series would also go 7 games. Now you might think it would take PG playing like trash to allow the Hawks to steal 3 games, but actually no. With the exception of Game 3, he played well the entire series. And with the Pacers down 2-3, facing potential elimination in the first round to the goddamn 8 seed, PG played well in both Games 6 and 7, and helped the Pacers avoid being one of the rare shit cunts in NBA history to lose to the 8 seed in the first round. A big reason this series went as many games as it did is because Paul George's fellow All-Star, Roy Hibbert, contributed next to fuck all, including back-to-back games where he scored 0 points, one of which where he had 0 rebounds and only had 2 rebounds in the other. This dude is a 7'2" All-Star center that managed to get 2 rebounds over 2 games combined. The second round was versus the Wizards, led by a young John Wall and Bradley Beal, and PG was once more good all series long and helped the Pacers win fairly easily in 6 games. The Pacers probably should have won in 5 games, except Roy Hibbert had yet another 0-point, 0-rebound game in Game 1, plus he also had 5 fouls. That is historically trash. The highlight of the series was absolutely in Game 4, when PG had the best playoff game of his career, dropping 39 points on only 20 shot attempts. And mind you, the Pacers needed every one of those points. At one point in the third quarter, they were down 19 points, and managed to only sneak out with a 3-point victory. Although the Pacers perhaps hadn't been as dominant as you might expect from a first seed, they were still back in the Eastern Conference Finals for a rematch against the Miami Heat, and this time they held home court advantage. With a good game from PG, and with Lance Stevenson making LeBron his bitch, that was an advantage they protected in Game 1 with a W. But come Game 2, George would lay an egg, and the Pacers would lose home court advantage, before quickly falling into a 3-1 hole after the Heat won Games 3 and 4. And that was no thanks to old mate Hibbert, who had another 0-point game in the playoffs, the 4th time in that year's playoffs. Just a quick reminder that this guy was an all-star that year. So then comes Game 5, where PG would begin a trend of playing really well in Game 5s when facing elimination down 3-1. He finished the game with 37 points, 21 of which came in the 4th quarter, and was very clutch down the stretch. Yes, shock horror, PG has in fact been clutch multiple times in important playoff games. He did nearly fuck up and turn the ball over with 15 seconds left, but got lucky and then drew a foul on Miami, and the Pacers escaped with the W. But of course, the main hero of the game was Lance Stephenson because he blew in LeBron's face and created a meme that will last to the end of time. Now, unlike the year before, where PG followed up an amazing Game 6 performance with a god-awful Game 7, this year, whilst following an amazing Game 5, PG had a very good Game 6. He dropped an efficient 29 points with only 1 turnover. Previously in the series, he was averaging nearly 3 turnovers a game. However, unfortunately for PG, he was playing against Game 6 LeBron, and the Heat would stomp the Pacers. Another year, another playoff loss to LeBron. Third straight year, actually. Nonetheless, it had still been a great year for PG and the Pacers. Lance Stephenson created an iconic meme, the team was getting better, and PG was on track to becoming a legitimate NBA superstar. The Pacers' trajectory was setting them up to become NBA champions in the near future. What could possibly stop that from happening? Well, how about a gruesome, potentially career-ending injury to their best player that came out of literally nowhere in the offseason? In the 2014 offseason, during a Team USA scrimmage in Las Vegas, PG was apparently choking and was having an off game. So in an effort to not look so trash in front of the fans, George was being a try-hard on defense, and after going up to contest a James Harden layup, he landed a tad bit awkwardly and snapped his fucking right leg in half. I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure your leg isn't meant to do that. George definitely wasn't going to be playing on an NBA court anytime soon.
This is Hot Tub Book Club time.
When you're a blossoming NBA superstar, breaking your leg in half at 24 years old is probably the last thing on the list of things you want to do, and it caused PG to basically miss the entire 2015 season as he worked on getting healthy. However, one silver lining is that with all that free time on his hands, PG was able to spend lots of time in the gym working on his jump shot, and when he entered the 2016 season fully healthy, his work on becoming an improved shooter showed, with his 3-point shooting percentage in that season and every year onwards being better than every season prior. And despite his right leg literally being in 2 pieces 14 months earlier, after a year of rehabbing, PG was fully healthy and played the entire 2016 season like his all-star self once more. That was a fact he made absolutely clear when he dropped a career-high 48 points in early December. You also may have noticed that Paul is now wearing number 13, as opposed to 24. He had changed it after the 2014 season because of an interview with Jimmy Kimmel in January of that year. In that interview, Jimmy is like, "Bill Simmons reckons you should change your number to 13 so you can be PG-13. And PG is like, "Hey, that's not bad. Got a bit of a ring to it. Fuck it, I might as well just change it." And so he did. But the Indiana team PG-13 was coming back to play with was not the same Pacers team of old. David West was gone, Lance Stephenson was gone, Roy Hibbert was gone. I mean, Roy Hibbert's career basically ended in the 2014 playoffs anyway. So despite PG coming back healthy and balling out for the whole season, this Pacers team only managed to snag 45 wins in the East and entered the playoffs as the 7th seed. And in the first round, they'll be facing the 2nd-seeded 56-win Toronto Raptors. Now, for all the shit everyone gives the DeMar DeRozan era Toronto Raptors, they were always a good team. They just happened to be a good team that was prone to a very significant amount of choking in the playoffs. The Raptors in particular have a propensity for choking game 1s in the first round when they have home court advantage, and fortunately for the Pacers, in 2016 it was no exception. Indiana would win game 1 behind a fantastic game from George, and a trash game from both DeRozan and Lowry. PG would play alright over the next 3 games, with the Pacers going 1-2 in that span, meaning the series was tied 2 apiece when it came to a pivotal game 5. Whoever snagged the dub tonight would take a commanding 3-2 series lead, and PG came ready to play. George would tie his playoff career high by scoring 39 points in what is, according to the game score, the best playoff game of his career. However, as great as PG was this game, and he was great, the Pacers would still come up short by 3 points. And although he is absolutely the main reason they had a chance of winning this game, PG is also one of the reasons they lost it. You see, for the first 3 quarters of game 5, Paul was absolutely splendid, sublime if you will, and entering the 4th quarter, the Pacers had a very comfortable 13-point lead. However, during the quarter break leading up to the 4th, George must have taken an ice bath in the locker room or something because he cooled off completely. In the 4th quarter, PG had 2 points, 2 fouls, and 2 turnovers. The Pacers would only manage to score 9 points in the final period, and ended up blowing their lead and losing the game. So, you know, bit of a damper ending to what was an otherwise great game from PG. But it wasn't over yet, as in Game 6, the Raptors star duo suffered a classic case of choking, and PG played decent enough to help the Pacers win and force a Game 7. And this Game 7 would come down to the wire. PG played a pretty good game overall, and despite the Pacers trailing nearly the entire game, he helped bring them back to within 3 points with under a minute left in the fourth. Of course, DeRozan bricked his 3 at the other end, so now the Pacers had a chance to either tie the game or bring the deficit to 1 point. And George Paul turns it over. This was actually his 7th turnover for the game, which doesn't really help the old trying to win thing. He would try a 3 in the next possession, but it was a fat brick, and she was all over. The Pacers lose a close Game 7. After Indiana's mediocre 2016 season, the Pacers' president of basketball operations, Larry Bird, wasn't too pleased with the current team's outlook and made a number of moves during the offseason. In an effort to help his team click and get them to not play like a walking brick, the hick from French Lick was quick to give coach Frank Vogel the flick, believing that would do the trick. Bird continued this shtick as he would decide to pick George Hill to kick in the dick in exchange for this prick, who he thought would make the team more slick. Or in other words, the 2 remaining faces from the 2014 Pacers team not named Paul George, which was Frank Vogel and George Hill, were now gone. In return, some fresh blood was joining the team. And before the season started, some people believed that these acquisitions would actually be enough to propel the Pacers into being one of the main contenders in the East once more. Spoiler alert, they weren't. 2017 was another very average year for the Pacers, despite Paul George continuing to play at his all-star level. But a big congratulations to Paul, as in this season he would hit his first game-winning shot of his career. Now, it wasn't in an actual game, but in a Gatorade commercial, but that's just an unimportant technicality. This commercial would very quickly become a meme clowning on Paul George, but whatever. Hey, speaking of memes, guess who's back? Back again. Lance is back. Lance's return was a good thing, as PG was going to need every bit of help he could get in the playoffs, as in the first round he was facing, yet again, LeBron James. Or in other words, PG was facing a death sentence. Many people seem to forget that the 2017 Cavs team was actually a decent bit better than it was the year before. And of course, the year before, they had won the championship when Golden State blew a 3-1 lead in the finals. And LeBron James also has this thing he does in the playoffs where he literally just doesn't lose to teams in the Eastern Conference. So good luck, Indiana. But come the end of Game 1, it appeared luck might just be on their side when PG nailed this clutch as fuck 3 in the final minutes to bring the score within 1. And then at the other end, LeBum threw up a LeBrick and the Pacers had a chance to win the game. So it came down to this final possession here. Evidently, CJ Miles didn't trust Paul George's ability to hit a game-winning shot, despite the Gatorade commercial, and took it upon himself to win the game. Which he didn't, and PG wasn't very happy about that.
I talked to CJ about it. Situations like that, I gotta get the last shot.
In Game 2, George had another very good game, which included another clutch 3 late in game that kept the Pacers' chances of winning alive. And although they were still probably screwed down 6 with 18 seconds left, an offensive foul by CJ Miles ensured that their chances of losing were guaranteed. Okay, Game 3, at home. The Pacers were determined to win this one. No more close losses, this was going to be a blowout. And behind Paul George's best game of the series, heading into the third quarter, everything was going to plan. The Pacers led by 25 points at halftime, and guess what they did with that 25-point lead? They blew it. Behind LeBron's 41-point triple-double, the Cavs would come back and eventually win the game. And what was Paul George doing throughout the third quarter when the Cavs were making their comeback, I hear you asking? Absolutely fuck all is the answer. For the third quarter, PG scored 0 points on 5 attempts from the field, and Cleveland managed to finesse their way back into the game as a result. Another good game wasted. At least CJ Miles was making clutch buckets in an attempt to get PG's forgiveness for the first 2 games. So now comes Game 4. I assume the Pacers' main goal at this point was just to avoid getting swept in front of their home crowd. And now facing the threat of immediate elimination, Paul George comes out and plays like George Paul, aka not good. Despite his subpar performance, it was still, once more, a close game down the stretch. And after a near turnover, PG recovered the ball and had a chance to tie the game for overtime. And oh god. This is the last shot PG took as an Indiana Pacer, and it couldn't have been any uglier, and would serve as spicy meme material to be used with his Gatorade commercial. Ah well, it was a sweep, but at least it was a competitive one. And PG had played well in every game except Game 4, but nonetheless, the current outlook for the team wasn't super bright. It was clear they weren't making it past, at most, the second round anytime soon. Thus, with 1 year remaining on his contract, PG did what I believe all NBA superstars should do when they know they want to leave their team, which is to tell their front office that they want to be traded before their contract runs out, ensuring that their team will get something back for them as a result, as opposed to them simply leaving the team high and dry in free agency a year later. I'm looking at you, Kevin. So PG did just that. He requested a trade, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, of all teams, was quick to snag him up.